What's up, guys? It's Kictor. I am here today with Jeanet to speak about a very special series that we both watched recently. Tadaima Okaeri, also known as Welcome Home. Before this anime, how well-versed in the Omegaverse were you?
Not very. I knew it existed, and I'd read a anime that I would recommend to anyone because it was a very good easing you into the Omegaverse kind of thing, and it was called Accidental Mark or Accidentally Mark. That was my foundation, where they kind of play with the typical tropes of overpowering and like all these very kind of weird and non-consensual things about Omegaverse that the main character is just like, I'm not doing that. We're taking a different route. So like through that, I kind of got to figuring things out, but I wouldn't say I'm very familiar. I just know there's a lot of dubious consents that could potentially take place.
That's the thing with Omegaverse, is that I feel like it's, in a way, it's almost thinly veiled, like, fuck or die scenario.
Oh, yes. Not that you put it that way. That's one of the things that I'm so happy that the first Omegaverse thing that I know of to grace anime donghua space is this, because I feel like it could have gone dark very quickly.
Definitely. And like my experience with Omegaverse was just basically seeing fan art, and I have read a few fan fictions, but I definitely was not like a big Omegaverse fan. So I kind of just knew of like the tropes and was expecting, honestly, like yaoi bullshit. Like I was expecting it to just be so toxic. And then it ended up being this like beautiful family story.
This was the thing for me where I feel like they almost, I don't want to say advocated for Omegaverse, but I think represented what I personally found quite appealing to it is the family aspect that you can have because of the setup of the world. And obviously adoption and surrogacy and things like that is a thing in the real world, but it's not something that I ever really see portrayed in any kind of gay media. Like I can think maybe of two that I've seen that has that adoptive family dynamic. So having just a very sweet family and them being beautiful, I get why some people would absolutely love Omegaverse.
Yeah, it truly mpreg is missing from the real world and so much media, because it's like, there's so many hoops you have to jump through to actually adopt someone, unless it's like a Wangshin scenario where it's like they ended up raising a kid.
They acquired a kid.
Acquiring a kid versus like a modern AU where a couple is actually wanting to adopt a kid kind of thing. They could just actually have a kid of their own, and they have two kids of their own, like naturally, because of the wonders of mpreg. And the thing that I was not expecting in this story is how they really used the basis of the Omegaverse tropes to foil real-world prejudice with like either same-sex couples but also interracial couples, because there was definitely the like, don't mate outside of your type, and if you are with someone outside your type, you can face prejudice both ways. And that's what was different in this anime, because normally Omegaverse is like the alphas and the omegas are the norm, right? I feel like it's more of like a gimmick in fandom spaces if two alphas to get together, and then it's almost like one alpha is portraying an omega's role. It's like by being the bottom. But in this world, it's like super weird if you are an alpha and an omega.
Yeah, I think what I had gathered is that beta and beta pairings were pretty normal in the normal version of Omegaverse, and then it would usually be alpha and omega, and that is the standard.
Yes. And if you're born an omega, you like gotta watch out, but also know like, oh, I could have like an incredible alpha mate.
I don't know, it was just very interesting, the choices that they made in order to still have prejudice be a topic of discussion, because they could have so easily circumvented that, and then we would have had a lot less deep of a story.
Yeah, and the story was deep. I made a lot of jokes about Masaki being so traumatized. Like, every episode, he gets traumatized by some aspect. At first, it was his own trauma about his upbringing, but the setting even just starts where it's like, oh yeah, we had to move neighborhoods because we were not being treated well in our previous one. Like, we didn't even get to see that. But it's just, that's the basis of the show. It immediately was like, oh, Omegas are treated terribly in this world.
It was very sad to see how much trauma he'd been through, but what I do appreciate about the way that they treated his trauma is he was not his trauma.
Yes.
His trauma formed a part of him and how he interacted with the world, but he was still like incredibly kind and obviously trying his best despite the struggles that he had experienced previously.
Absolutely. And I really liked that. Like, this is going to sound kind of fucked up, but there's that one episode, and it really stuck with me, where he falters a little bit, and he has that, like, fucked up thought where he's almost like, should I, like not have this baby that's currently in me because I am not suited for this?
Yeah.
That was, like, crazy. I could not believe they, like, went there, but I feel like, I personally have never been pregnant, but I am one to have dark thoughts every now and then. And I feel like that's probably a thought that mothers, you know, do have. And then having that thought immediately afterwards, you'd be like so fucking scared and be like, oh my God, that's not me. I am not that. That was just like my trauma speaking. And it really showed how he like came over that.
Yeah, no, it was like, that was viscerally uncomfortable, but in the best way possible. Like, it was so uncomfortable, but so raw and real. That I just really appreciated that they included that. And it was also just very sad to see because people are so callous with their words. They're so careless with their words if they don't see where you're coming from. And, I did not like the cousin, so I was like extra defensive.
That episode, at first I was like, what in the yaoi bullshit is this? Like, incest? Like, what the fuck? Also, I had a strange amount of comments of people being like, this is actually not that weird in Japan to like be married to your cousin. So that was a rabbit hole I went down. I was like, okay. But then I really saw that it came from this like uber strange place of wanting to protect Omegas, of just like Omegas wanting to protect themselves. And I understood where it's like, you know, we'll marry you within the family and we know that you will be safe. But realistically, you can't live your life that way. It's like keeping someone locked in a box and you know that they're safe in the box, but they don't want to be in the box.
Yeah, no, I'm jumping ahead a little, but I appreciated having that kind of revisited in the final few episodes where we saw from a parent's perspective why they might do with the child what was done to Mazuki. So, and like, I have mixed feelings about Mazuki's parents, but I liked that they weren't outright villainized.
Yes.
Because sometimes family is just complicated.
Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. It's almost like if they were just villainous, it would be a lot easier to like hate them and be like, that's fucked up. How could they raise their kid that way? But then I think the writing of the story was really well done. Just like what you said with, I think the guy's name is like Otto-san or something, like Michi's dad, and how protective he was of his like Omega son. And you're like, this is Masaki's parents. Like, you know he's not a bad guy. And you just know he's literally like, these alphas could ruin my life or my child's life, so I don't want to be anywhere near them.
Yeah, I think for the most part, the writers are very clear with where they stand on issues, and I have to appreciate that because oftentimes I find that writers, because they're discussing a topic, it almost sounds like they're justifying it or like things like that, and this felt very natural and almost neutral in a sense where you can appreciate it from both sides.
Definitely. Yeah. You can understand why the prejudice exists, also from both sides too. Like, not to defend alphas, but we even got that aside from Matsu, who was Hiro's friend, and they're both alphas. And One thing we can talk about that also was very interesting too is that Masaki and Hiro did not mate right off the bat. And they were actually together for like 8 years before that even happened. And Matsu was like, you know, telling his friend, like, can you please mate with your boyfriend? Because as an alpha, being around an unmated omega is actually really tough. So you can kind of also see where the alpha, like, weird hatred towards omegas come from, because they are also being put in an uncomfortable situation. So you can see how this like divide and prejudice kind of naturally would arise, even though it's not right or nice.
One thing that kind of I found frustrating is technically it's you are put in a situation where it's an omega in heat and the alpha responds because of it. And we saw it demonstrated with Hiromu how he didn't want to be responding to it. It wasn't that he at all desired Oto-san, but he still responded to it. And if you have something actually happen between the two of them, both of these people are not consenting to it.
Yes.
And I can't help but feel a bit of pity for alphas in that regard, because it sounded in the way that Oto-san phrased it that alphas were villainized because naturally they kind of take on the more aggressive role within that dynamic, but neither of them would be consenting either way. So
yes, 1000%. Like it's you're taking away the alpha's like agency. It's like, as an omega, you could see it as like, I'm the prey and I'm being hunted by the predators. But to them, they are the prey to their own like physiology. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, as I think we would see in the real world, there will always be scummy people who do take advantage because they're higher on the food chain or whatever. But it doesn't excuse the fact that you're painting everyone with the same brush both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I enjoyed the setup of this. The Omegaverse with a bit of a twist where, you know, it was like alpha on alpha is the norm and omega is the norm, because it allowed this story to unfold. And the story is really about Masaki like stumbling almost like in his own faith of himself and what he deserves, because a large part of him was when he was younger, he was very insecure about like, I think just what he deserved, or even if he could be with an alpha, because that was kind of drilled into him as a kid. And then by the 12th episode, he's still being comforted by Hiro, but he's so happy and he's able to think back of like what he's gone through and be okay if something does kind of like trigger him. Like it's like you're gonna go through the world and you're gonna be reminded of how sad it can be, but he really does gain strength because of his family and confidence in himself.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And for me, I think how I kind of read a part of his past trauma was also his parents constantly apologizing for him being an omega.
Yes.
Because I personally was not really aware of the potential like sexual discrimination between two women for most of my life up until like 5 years ago. I have lived a very privileged life in that sense, but I was never told to be like viewing it as if there is an inequality between myself and any man that I come across. And I think the moment that the parents were like, okay, you know, we're so sorry that you're an omega. I'm so sorry you turned out to be an omega. It's my fault that you're an omega. Suddenly you feel like, obviously it's something to be ashamed of, even though it doesn't have to be. But because of the way you've been raised, it's like, oh, obviously it has to be, because why would everyone be apologizing and pitying me and, you know, being so weary around me?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the parallel to like being born a girl is definitely like accurate. Like I've not that like my family's ever said this to me, but I feel like there's definitely been scenarios where it's like, oh, this would have been, you never would have gone through this if you were a boy kind of thing. And even just feeling that yourself is just like they were able to capture that in the Omegaverse.
Yeah, and I think what's nice about it is I applied it now to discrimination between the sexes, but it could also be applied to, oh, I'm so sorry you were born a different race, or not like exactly my skin color if we're talking about the interracial marriages, or even a different sexuality than I have myself. Like, there's just so many ways that you can view that, and I think it makes it so much more applicable to anyone watching us.
Yes, and that internalized, like, disgust or like homophobia, or just the fact that like you even think I can't be with another race because it's been like drilled into you. I loved the line in the final episode where Masaki was like, the worst part wasn't actually like the prejudice that I have experienced. It was in my own head feeling like I couldn't express the love I felt to the person that I loved. And it was actually like, it was all him. It was just like, I can't do this. There's no one like stopping me. It's just me stopping me. And that was the hardest part. And I was like, oh shit. Like all that trauma building up to make you unable to be your authentic self. Oh, that's like, anybody can relate to that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the shining star of that was they're kind of like, we're not going to let our kids grow up and feel those prejudices.
Yeah, and I mean, like, what I also appreciated was Malaki saying, you know, I know it's unrealistic. I think he said it while he was talking to Otto-san, like, it's unrealistic to expect that they'll never encounter the prejudices, but we have to give them the tools to handle it when it comes, not try and keep them away from ever encountering it.
Yes, definitely. And then even Hiro has that line where he's like, yeah, there's like a lot of alphas.
I understand it. I understand the fear. I understand the prejudice, but this is not a solid plan.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, goodness, no. I have to say the humor of the show as well just peak, in my opinion. I enjoyed it so much. The show with all the trauma, so wholesome.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it has just the best balance of the sweet moments, the humor, and then the more deep moments, because otherwise it would just be fluff, and I don't actually enjoy just fluff for the most part.
I agree. I love some angst. This was mega angst. I enjoyed it though. Even also, we have the lasting romance between Masaki and Hiro, like the scenes where they're like cuddling each other and like comforting and just like kissing and flirting was like really fun to watch. But also there's like the budding romance between Yuki and Matsu, and that's like, ooh, like especially the last couple episodes, that was really cute.
Yeah. I had such a soft spot for Yuki, but I don't think you would be surprised. Like, I'm very biased towards introverted, kind of like awkward, does not have social cues kind of men.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that applies in real life, but definitely when I'm reading or watching shows, I just gravitate towards them.
Yeah.
So it was really sweet seeing him kind of find his feet with Matsu, and Matsu being just so patient about it, and also like, and not necessarily expecting anything, because I think it was episode 10 or 11 where you have them interacting, and like things are finally starting to seem like they're going in an actual direction. Yuki's questioning his feelings and things like that, and I just sat there appreciating that. I would love if they got together, but their friendship is so beautiful that I kind of don't care. Like, as long as they exist together in the same atmosphere and they're happy, I don't care, because they're just so sweet together.
Absolutely. And the show really makes you value just like a family situation, even just if that is like neighbors. Like Masaki's friendship with Yuki is really special and nice too. And even like Yuki's like friendship with Hikari, like that's as innocent as it comes, but it just shows that like that kind of big family, just having lots of people that you really trust is really nice. So if Matsu and Yuki were just friends, that would be another just example of a good relationship.
Yeah, like I was very much in love with their dynamic because I liked it that we got to see both sides. We got to see the married, settled in side from Masaki and Hiromu, and then we got to see a new, potentially developing love.
Yeah, another developing love is the twins. The twins and Oto-san, like, what? I was like, that's the yaoi bullshit I came here for.
I was sat there piecing together the fact that, okay, this is definitely not just my imagination. They're definitely implying something here, and then they came out and they stated it. And I'm like, I could see this show going, like, threesome way.
Right? Like, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to be polyamorous.
Like, I didn't think too much about it originally, and then when they started fighting, I was like, weirdly enough, I don't think it's going to be a brother against brother situation. I think it's going to be a we're all in this together situation.
Because wouldn't that be so funny? Like, the guy who's afraid of alphas, the guy who has written off alphas, ends up with two alpha boyfriends.
Oh, that would be glorious. And they're already enamored with Michi, so, like, that's a good start.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Oh my god.
The irony of that, that would be glorious, but this show really felt as if it was already planning a season 2 just because of kind of where we ended off. And I actually liked that they didn't feel the need to wrap either of the side potential love stories up, because like, you don't really need that. You can infer from that what you want to infer from that, and if they give us season 2, I will happily watch it. But it was nice that they didn't feel the need to tie it up in a very neat bow.
Yeah, and like, truly, I feel like I'd be okay with if there was a season 2 and like Yuki was more of the main character, and like Masaki and Hiromu were like side characters that obviously still exist in their little friendship family. But getting to know more about Yuki's backstory and maybe even his like inside thoughts of what it's like being a beta. And like, also like, imagine, I feel like I'm internalizing this already. It's like, as a beta, if you're gonna be with an alpha, I would feel like I'm a beta and I already know that I have no chance of having a special connection with anybody. But then if you're with an alpha, you're like robbing them of that special connection. It's like, I can never be an Omega. I can never give you like a proper mate. Like, wouldn't I be wasted on you?
Oh, goodness. You're just like, I give you the entire package of prejudice, but none of the perks or potential hope. And like, I can see that happening, but at the same time, I'm like, no, please don't give me that trauma with Yuki. I feel like he has enough other things going on. But yeah, no, I definitely could see that happening. And I feel like if there's anyone I would trust to handle that situation, it would be Matsu. So
yeah,
like, he was definitely underrated for me in the series. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, definitely. And I liked how... Do you remember the episode where they had like, they drove the twins back to the airport and they kind of had like the bro chat in the car?
Yeah.
It truly just felt like dumb straight guys being like, so like the girl you like kind of thing.
But I also liked that he was like, I know exactly where all of you are at. Come into the car. I'm not having this conversation here.
Yes. And they kind of worked out, because Hiromu was like, I know this one's different because you've never told me to like not tease you about something before, so now I know it's like serious, which is like really cute.
I like their friendship because it feels very real and grounded, and it was nice to just kind of have adults being adults. Like, for the most part, they're very emotionally mature and able to talk things out when things get a bit complicated. So it was nice that the issues didn't so much lie with issues within the relationship, but more just issues that are bound to crop up in any situation, in any relationship, no matter how strong it might be.
Yeah, their conflict was like the what are we? It wasn't really like this greater scheme of the world.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, oh, he's abusive, but I don't know, I maybe still want to be with him, which, I've read Urha. I'm not going to judge people's enjoyment, but I'm so happy we didn't have that here.
Yeah, no, it was good. And I trust that, Hiromu and everybody would just be so kind to their budding relationship.
Yeah, they were maybe a bit too kind, according to Marty. Like, you guys are cheering on too loudly.
Yes. But you know who, steadfastly surprised me of just being so perfect was Hiromu. He is the perfect husband. I don't think he faltered, once. He is Masaki's fucking ride or die, almost on, a Hwa-chung level. He was like, oh, my family doesn't approve of you? Fuck them. Oh, this neighborhood doesn't approve of you? Fuck that. You don't approve of us? He's like, fuck that. We're gonna fix that. The fact that Hiro was like, we are not gonna mate until you see this relationship as, your worth is valid. The fact that Hiro did not mate with him while Masaki was still feeling insecure is just, that's amazing. That is so healthy.
But it's incredibly healthy, and I think that's, obviously on the one side, you can be like, oh, it's too perfect. We get it. But I think you kind of need that, and in good relationships, you also kind of get that. Maybe he does have some insecurities, but it doesn't lie in the same place where it lies for Masaki. He might have other insecurities that just weren't triggered by any of the events surrounding Masaki's triggers, so he was able to be the rock in those situations that Masaki needed.
Yeah.
And I think good relationships, for the most part, you kind of manage to be the calm one while the other one needs it, and vice versa.
Yeah.
He was a hero indeed. I think he was great, but I do think it's also kind of a statement of how much you sometimes need to be able to endure when you choose to go against the grain like that. And obviously, it's also debatable how much of a choice it is, but...
Definitely. And, we got to see him at his lowest, which was in the shower.
Yeah.
After he finessed that scenario, too. If he were to, show his true colors or something in that scenario, he could have told Auto-san to get the fuck out or something, but he did, while he was the one being embarrassed, he tried to cause the least amount of embarrassment for everybody else, and just calmly took care of the scenario, and then was like, I have the biggest boner right now, I need to go take a shower before something happens.
That's exactly what went through his mind, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
That was great. Someone needs to clip that and just add that into the initial scene. Yeah, no, I think it was a statement to not just how much he is constantly considering Masaki in the situations, even when he's in duress. But also, I was hopeful that this was maybe also a good example of when alphas aren't aggressing, this is probably the average alpha's experience when something like that happens, is they really don't want to be there. They're going to try and get out of the situation as quickly as possible, and then they're going to feel really crap about it afterwards because they probably have a girlfriend, or they might not even be attracted to the person, or it might be their friend.
Yeah.
There's so many ways where that was a very good distillation of what the average alpha probably experiences when they get a involuntary boner. So
yeah, definitely. That scene was kind of scary too, when it was their pheromones were interacting, and it was just what's gonna happen? Because also right before that is when like Oto saw Masaki had the mark and was like, yes, what is that? And it was like, oh my god, the call is coming from inside the house. Like, the killer is coming, and then the killer opens the door.
Yeah, it had very good horror vibes in that moment. I was genuinely terrified, not just because of what could happen, but also like I was scared that he would accidentally escalate a situation because of how fearful he was, where maybe there wouldn't have been need for it. And obviously we saw how that played out. But initially I was just like, what if he like takes it out of proportion and then something goes wrong and this goes wrong and then they're terrified of each other for the stupidest reason? Like,
yeah. Yes, I'm very thankful that like Masaki and Hiromu's relationship didn't have any of interpersonal drama. Like, I don't know if I'd be able to take that. Like, I'm just so glad he had his rock. That just stayed a rock.
A very firm rock.
Yes. Oh my god. Okay. Any other thoughts on the show, on the trope, on what it means?
One thing that I did appreciate was seeing like where we start off from the first episode and slowly seeing Masaki's circle expand, because it wasn't ever, I didn't ever feel like we were being head over the head with it, but it was just very nice to kind of like be able to track it almost, and seeing the amount of people who show him that they're accepting of him become more and more.
Yeah, and that's a perfect, like, when he went to Hiro's work and like some people that were there saw his papers on the ground and they found out he was an Omega, and just kind of like that sting of like, oh, you're an Omega? And it was like, that's how easy it is for the world to not be kind to him. So slowly seeing his world get bigger and bigger with people that are kind to him over the course of the story was really nice.
Yeah, like, and now that you mention it, because I'd forgotten about the scene of him dropping the papers by the time that I got to the episode with Oto-san and Hiromu meeting for the first time. So I was kind of taken off guard because I forgot that they can't like smell it, because in Accidental Log, I think they had the thing where you can tell immediately what gender the person is because of the underlying sense of them or something like that. I can't remember, but I was like, oh, so this is not you can't just like look at someone and tell.
Yeah, I think with the suppressants, like he's taking those pills, people just can't smell your pheromones. Just like how Yuki in the last episode had to reveal to Oto-san that he was a beta, which was a hilarious scene.
Yeah.
I'm a safe space, I promise.
Follow me, like, you can't just stay out in public.
Right. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing too, is like in this world, it can be a secret. So it's almost like people would probably assume you're like an alpha, or if you're hanging around other alphas, I guess.
Yeah. I think probably like, oh, you stick to your class. But how does that work? Let's not analyze it. It's fine. I was just thinking, how does it work in a work environment? Because surely you don't just know off the bat which of your colleagues are safe to work with and which aren't.
Yeah, I think it's like there's also the social hierarchy of like alphas are kind of like CEOs and like rich people, and then like the lower class are usually like Omegas, just like how Oto-san was like the construction worker who like laid those beautiful tiles, and Hiromu and Matsu and like all their little workers that work up in like the skyscraper are alphas. So you'd probably like assume that like if you work in my high class job, you're probably an alpha
or a beta. Maybe they go by the trope of like the majority of the world is betas.
Yeah, that could be. Oh my god, yeah. And I guess like that's another interesting aspect that I'm trying to like relate to our everyday world, is like having to take pills to suppress your pheromones, or else you'll like trigger an alpha. Like my two thoughts are kind of like, it's kind of like birth control, but it's also a part of it is almost like hear me out. If it's like, you know, in school, like girls aren't allowed to wear like spaghetti strap like tank tops because you'll distract the boys. So it's like as an Omega, you have to take a precautionary thing, or else you'll distract the alphas. Except in the Omegaverse, that's actually valid. In like our world, it's like, fuck you, the boys should just not be distracted. What the hell?
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if everyone had suppressants. Like alphas also needed to wear suppressants. Like if everyone had to, then it would also explain why he had to be told that Yuki was a beta.
Right.
But I totally agree with you. I think it's more equivalent to, oh, you need to dress properly, or you need to do this and that, not to like be sexualized.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's because when Omegas go into heat, that's when they trigger the alphas. So then I think it's like a rut. Is that the word?
Rut. Yeah. That's the word. I don't even know how I know it. I'm just assuming it's accidental.
Oh my god, that's so funny. Goodness. But and you know what's interesting is that I feel like when you read Omegaverse fan fiction, it's like all of the politics can be amazing, the like relating to social issues can be amazing, but what you're kind of working towards is like there's gonna be a fucking crazy sex scene that is like animalistic in nature, and maybe a character can almost be like out of character because they are in heat or because they're in a rut, and then it's like they're gonna have this like crazy explosive sex, like oh my god. And I've definitely seen that as a way for like tsundere characters to suddenly be like sex gods.
Like, based on my knowledge of BL, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I just wanted to say I can definitely see the writer using Omegaverse to justify characters acting OOC because of that.
Yeah, and or like, you know, forcing a juicy sexual scenario between people that already did want to like bang each other. So then it's like, oh no, our hormones, our pheromones are interconnected. Guess we're gonna bang, and it's like not problematic because you know that they wanted to anyways, but maybe they were too nervous to actually initiate it. But in this show, we don't encounter that. It's like this is a married couple who have already banged, clearly want to bang each other. That when he goes into heat, it was like a problem.
Yeah.
Like, he had to go to the hospital. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I think they very much more framed it as the... not... Well, how should I say it? They didn't glorify it at all.
Yeah, definitely. They didn't make it like a juicy, like, awesome thing.
Yeah, and the what, to me, having a heat or a rut, I would assume is as inconvenient as potentially like having your period when you're out camping and you're unprepared, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like...
Absolutely.
Like, most of these things don't happen just whenever you're good and ready for it.
Definitely.
So I kind of like that they took that angle with it that felt much more real world.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's on the Omega to like be sure that they're suppressed. And also, with Oto-san, he even had a special thing where it's like, he can't get his dosage correctly, and like his heat still like...
Yes, I thought that was so cleverly done.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that, like, you know, even like, it's not a perfect parallel, but like some women don't react well to like birth control. And like, or like it gives you like a bad reaction or something. And so there's like different reasons why just like having to take pills to suppress yourself sucks. And it was another reason why Oto-san was like, I'd rather just live in an Omega only world.
Zone.
Yeah, because like this thing that I have to do to like alter my body doesn't really like work all that well.
Yeah. Like when I saw that scene, I immediately equated it to like if you're bipolar and you need to take medication for that, the fact that you kind of have to trial and error that, and it can mess with your emotions, it can make it worse, it can make it better. Like, I really like that detail. It was well done.
Yeah, it's so funny how it's in this absolutely made up, like, BL world, but it took so many, like, small truths from the real world.
Yeah. To circle back, this is why I'm glad that we got the show, because they could have just been so silly about it, and they actually took the time and were serious, and it was glorious. And I kind of like guessed this and then had it confirmed. I loved the fact that they had Given and Sasaki and Miyono's creators were involved somehow, and I was like, it makes sense why it's so glorious.
Oh, hey, that makes sense because it does the thing, the geometric shapes. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Exactly, yes. That's what I was like, this reminds me of Sasaki and Miyono, and the moments where they kind of like not lose focus, but they become very neon-y, like glowy and
yes, it's
less defined.
like a watercolor painting suddenly when there's like a really emotional moment. That's a really good like little director's thing.
Yeah,
I like that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it made the soft moments like extra soft. And that's when you knew there was no more trauma.
That's when we got a break.
Yeah.
I have a final question. Favorite 3 characters?
Okay. Both twins and the dog. No. No,
That's such a Hikari answer.
Yes, yeah, yes. I absolutely loved Masaki so much. Like, oh my god, he was relatable and he was so strong, and I just was never annoyed by him. I never thought like, oh, why are you feeling this way? Like, every time he felt a deep emotion, I was like, I get it, bro. I know exactly why you are acting the way you're acting. It didn't feel like he was ever being like lame, you know? I was like, yeah, it's like your feelings are valid. Yeah. And I loved him. Also, I loved his voice actor. Like, his laugh, every time he had that like genuine laugh, like, oh my god, I got like butterflies. I'm just like, I just love him. It's so pure. And I think I would have to say like Hiromu was just like awesome. And by the last episode, when he kind of even explained his own like modus operandi of dealing with prejudice and how he was like, I kind of see it more bluntly. It's just like, some people aren't going to accept me and they'll never understand me, so whatever. Which is very different than the deeply emotionally kind of traumatized perspective that Masaki has with prejudice. And I appreciated that because there are different people in the world that come from different perspectives, and understanding that he is the way he is and that they're a really good match because of their different perspectives was really beautiful, and I enjoyed that.
Well put.
For the third character, you know, we didn't talk much about the star of the show, Hikari, and how the pure innocence of children was the answer to a lot of the problems in the plot. It really bridged a lot of like these questions that seem like they didn't have answers, or like this isn't possible in the world, and then just like the innocence of a child being like, but I love my best friend, like healed all trauma.
Yes. I mean, to be fair, I think that they have something there, because if you're just willing to accept your child for who they are, a lot of issues could just be solved.
Yeah,
a lot of them.
Absolutely. So I think I'd have to say, even though I can't stand babies crying, I hate that sound effect so much, and he does cry quite a bit. His pure innocence and plot solvability, I think would make him my third favorite character. What about you?
Damn, I'm torn, because I totally agree with you about Hikari, but my first thought was Masaki, Hiromu, and Yuki.
Yes.
Because I just... that trio was perfection. I really liked as well that we got to see Yuki standing up for Masaki in his own way, like wanting to protect his first friend that he made. That was really sweet to me, because it wasn't that he like suddenly had all this capability, but it was like, I have the emotions, I have the willpower.
Yes, absolutely. And in the cousin episode, you see him kind of like be like, hey, this isn't right. And then in the last episode, he even checks in on Masaki too. He's like, hey, I heard about like what happened. And that kind of was like showing his growth.
Yeah. And the fact that he was willing to approach Oto-san to try and help mend the bridge between him and Masaki, when before he was so scared of talking to anyone. So... And obviously, we discussed Masaki and Hiromu. They're just perfect, and they cannot be separated. Hence, they are number 1 and 2 on the list.
Yes. Going back to Yuki really quick, I remembered the like first line I think he like says in episode 1 at the very end. He's talking to his mom, and they're like, "Oh, a new couple moved in." And he's like, "Oh, they're like an Omega Alpha couple or a male couple or whatever." And he's just like, "Oh, cool. Like that doesn't affect me at all." And it's like, little do you know, they are going to worm their way into your heart.
Yeah. No, I mean, to be fair, that's actually quite cool of him, because he doesn't care, because at that point, it doesn't affect him. I think he's kind of that neutral space that the show didn't have a lot of time to explore.
Yeah. So I would love to see a second season where it's like how he went from like feeling like he's just so blah and like to discovering this world of emotions of friends and budding romance.
Yeah, I feel like if there's a season 2, I agree, it has to be Yuki and Matsu focus, and then obviously it checks in with Masaki and them, but I wanna see how the thing with Oto-san and the twins play out as well. That would be a mess, a glorious mess.
Absolutely. Well, there is a manga, so I am considering picking up where the season ended to see what's going on.
I'm very tempted as well.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanet, for joining me on this yap session. Guys, be sure to check out Jeanet's channel. She reacts to all kinds of BL content and just Chinese media and stuff. Definitely check her out. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, click subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.